Hello and welcome to the first of many Vedic astrology classes which are made available to you as a subscriber. Today we're going to have an introduction to Vedic astrology, and we're going to talk about three different things, or at least three different things, which are the ecliptic, and I'll explain here in a moment, the zodiac, and something that's known as the Ayanamsa. Okay, I'm going to try to keep these classes to a short time frame, 10-15 minutes apiece when possible. I recognize people prefer to have things in small bite-sized chunks than big long classes, as we live in a modern world where things are rather fast-paced. So in honoring that, I'm going to try to keep things brief. And I say try because I recognize I'm pretty passionate about astrology, and I may get on a tangent and sometimes find myself in a position where it's hard to just kind of stop there. Okay, so we're going to start by talking about something that is known as the ecliptic. And in understanding astrology, we have to have a little bit of a minor astronomy lesson just so we understand some basic concepts. Okay, and the first thing that we want to talk about is the ecliptic, which is the apparent path of the sun. And I say the apparent path of the sun because we're talking about our perspective from here on Earth, where it appears as if the sun is moving around us, where we know that we're actually moving around the sun. But for the purposes of astrology, we're talking about the apparent path of the sun as it moves over the course of a year from south to north and north to south. Okay, so at the winter solstice, the sun is at its southernmost position, and at the summer solstice, the sun is at its northernmost position. And over the course of the year, the sun moves from south to north, and then back again from north to south. And this motion of the sun that we witness from here on the earth is known as the ecliptic. Okay, so that's what we're looking at when we are looking at the thing that's called the zodiac, because what the zodiac is 12 30-degree portions of the ecliptic from our perspective here on Earth. The zodiac is 12 30-degree portions of the ecliptic from our perspective here on Earth. The next concept is the signs. In Vedic astrology, we call these the rashis. And the rashis are the 30-degree portions themselves, okay? So Aries, Taurus, Gemini, all of these would be considered as the rashis. Okay, so the next point that we see is something that's called the Ayanamsa, the difference between the tropical and sidereal systems of astrology, which right now you have absolutely no idea, unless you already knew about this, of what I might be talking about. So that's where we need to get started. So let's understand what the tropical system of astrology is. Most Western astrology is known as tropical astrology, okay? And it's called tropical astrology because it's based on the tropics of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. The Tropic of Cancer is the point that the sun rises at the summer solstice, and the Tropic of Capricorn is the point that the sun rises at the winter solstice. Okay, and over the course of the year, the sun moves from the Tropic of Capricorn up to the Tropic of Cancer, and the Tropic of Cancer back to the Tropic of Capricorn. And that's why it's called tropical astrology. In tropical astrology, the cardinal points of the zodiac, and the cardinal points are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. So Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn mark the seasonal changes. Aries marks the spring equinox, Cancer marks the summer solstice, Libra marks the autumnal equinox, and Capricorn marks the winter solstice. Okay, so basically Western astrology marks the changes of the seasons with the cardinal points of the zodiac. And that's the way that they determine the ecliptic. That's the way that they determine the zodiac to be measured. It moves from the vernal equinox all the way through to the winter solstice. That's the measurements. Well, sorry, I shouldn't say that. The vernal equinox all the way through to the winter solstice, which begins with Capricorn, and then you go through Aquarius and Pisces after Capricorn, and then you have the beginning of the year again. But basically, the zodiac, in completing itself, moves from vernal equinox to vernal equinox. That's more what I was trying to say. Okay? Vedic astrology, or most practitioners of Vedic astrology, I should say, consider the zodiac to be measured from some fixed point in the heavens, which gives rise to the sidereal zodiac. So this is related to something that's called the precession of the equinoxes. I'm sure that many of you have probably heard of the Aquarian age, or the age of Aquarius, even if you've heard nothing other than that song from the 60s, which talks about the age of Aquarius. You've probably heard of it. And what that relates to is about 2,000 years ago, the tropical and sidereal systems of astrology coincided with each other. And over that time frame, they have since changed and have become somewhat different from each other within their calculation and understanding. But about 2,000 years ago, within the both the sidereal and tropical systems of astrology, the vernal equinox began with Aries. At present, from the sidereal calculation, the vernal equinox begins with Pisces, and that creates a difference between the two systems. Now, if you'll notice, I said most practitioners of Vedic astrology. Myself, I work with a system that is somewhat different from that, okay? And that system works with calculating the zodiac from the tropical perspective and calculating something called the nakshatras, which we'll touch on briefly, but they're a topic for another class. The nakshatras are calculated by the sidereal system, and with the system that I use, the zodiac, meaning the signs, are calculated with the tropical system. I wanted to touch on a couple of other points which I skipped over, which is something called the ayana. The ayana are the times when the sun shifts direction from south to north and north to south. In India, the ayanas are also the seasons, and amsha is a division. So Ayanamsa basically means the division that marks the difference from when the sun moves from south to north and north to south. Okay, so the system that I work with is, as I was saying before, calculates the zodiac in a tropical manner and calculates the nakshatras, the lunar mansions, in something by the system that is sidereal. What are the nakshatras? The nakshatras are subsections of the zodiac signs. In ancient times, the movement of the moon was marked against the fixed stars, or in relation to the fixed stars, as the moon is rather erratic in its movement along the ecliptic, the apparent path of the sun. But the moon could be marked over the movement over the course of a month, in relation to the fixed stars. Okay, so what we want to talk about in relation to this, if we want to understand the system which I work with, which uses the tropical system of the zodiac and the sidereal systems of nakshatras, we need to first share a diagram, which I'm going to do here. And if you'll pardon me, I have to just kind of switch screens, so bear with me for a moment. And this diagram is taken from my friend Ernst Wilhelm's site. And he's the person who is responsible for working and doing all the vast years of research which scientifically brought the concept of using a tropical zodiac with sidereal nakshatras more into the mainstream. And I'm just going to point some things out here. Hopefully you can see my pointer over here. Okay, and so here where you have the green line, that's the Earth itself. This line running through is an imaginary pole, the poles of the Earth, the North Pole running through to the South Pole. And this yellow line that we have over here, if I can get my cursor to work for me, but the yellow line that's near the green line is the ecliptic, or the path of the sun. Okay, so just to explain briefly, basically the zodiac is based on the Earth and its relationship to the sun, as the zodiac basically is 30-degree portions of the ecliptic. The zodiac is the relationship between the Earth and the sun over the course of the year. That being the case, it's only right that the zodiac should be tropical, because we're dealing with it from an Earth-based perspective in relationship to the ecliptic. Okay? Now, the nakshatras, or lunar mansions, which you see these numbers on the outer circle, they represent the 27 nakshatras. Okay? They are basically the things which are outside of our solar system. They're the fixed stars of the constellations. They should be measured as they do not necessarily relate to the Earth and its relationship to the Sun, as they are not within our solar system. They should be calculated by the sidereal system of astrology, which is more related to the fixed stars, as we briefly touched on before. So basically, if you have, and I want to point out this star over here by the number 13, if you see that, okay, you'll see that this star is near the number 13. But if you look at it from the Earth and in relation to the ecliptic, you'll see that it's over by the number 14. If you'll see the star, there's a line that's drawn from it directly to the ecliptic. That's where that star, or the vision of it, would intersect the ecliptic. So it could actually be in the 13th, but it would appear to be in the 14th nakshatra. So that creates a discrepancy. That's the difference between sidereal and tropical astrology, if we were to just, kind of draw it forwards. Okay? So basically, there is research that goes back to about 2,000 years ago. That's a rough estimate of the time frame when the two systems of astrology coincided with each other. And there is evidence that suggests that Vedic astrology, which has existed prior to that, Vedic astrology is probably the oldest known system of astrology that is still living. And a lot of people would argue with that, and it's not really a matter of controversy. It's just more, what each person has a preference towards, and there is a lot of controversy over that. But basically, the Vedic system of astrology would definitely predate that time frame and goes back even further. But that's not quite as important to our discussion. The reason that it's important to understand 2,000 years ago is that is when the two systems of astrology, the sidereal and tropical, coincided with each other. And as I was saying, there's evidence in ancient texts from around that time. If you're interested in knowing what that evidence is, you can write to me and I'll send you more information on it, but I'm trying to keep this class brief, so for the purpose of this, I'll just say evidence from ancient texts that suggests working with a tropical zodiac rather than a sidereal zodiac. So if most other Vedic astrologers work with the sidereal zodiac, how could that happen? How could there be the difference? Well, the belief is at the time when the tropical and sidereal systems coincided with each other, then basically Vedic culture lost its knowledge of the precession of the equinoxes. Okay, and so they just thought that that it should be calculated that way. And since then, the two systems have diversified, when perhaps it wasn't really necessary for the two systems to diversify and for there to become a conflict of interest in two different zodiacs. Okay, so basically, I used to work with sidereal zodiac, and when this concept was introduced to me, I began to work with it and tested it out on a lot of the methods and techniques that I use, and I have actually found this to be much more accurate than using a sidereal zodiac. I have found the tropical zodiac to be much more accurate in its deliverance of techniques. And in terms of picking up on things quickly within charts, I have found it to be much cleaner. And what I mean by cleaner is I have found myself less in a position of having to try to figure things out and wonder where things are, and it has felt less hazy and there's been less doubt in my mind. Things have practically just jumped out of the chart at me in a very quick and clean manner, and it's given me much higher accuracy. And as astrologers, we on one level are scientists and also artists. So from the scientific perspective, I feel that I have to work with this system because I find it to be much more accurate. Okay, so that's going to cover most of the concepts that we're wanting to talk about today. One of the main differences between Western and Vedic astrology, which are tropical and sidereal astrology, is something that's called the Ayanamsa. Now, the Ayanamsa is still used in the methods that I work with, because you use the Ayanamsa to calculate the position of the lunar mansions, or nakshatras, which are then brought into a tropical chart. Now, this is a really interesting concept, because if you follow the idea of human consciousness here within this, on this planet, so to speak, it's experiencing apparently this planet and an experience of consciousness, then that would be the Earth in its relationship to the Sun. But then when we bring the lunar mansions and nakshatras into the system as well, we're bringing something from outside of our solar system, something that's more universal, into our fixed idea of consciousness. And it gives us a deeper understanding. Now, just something briefly that I'm going to touch on is the Ayanamsa that I work with is something that's based upon a point that is called the galactic center. Just as the Sun is the center of our solar system, the Milky Way has the center too, which is located within the nakshatra or lunar mansion of Mula. So the lunar mansion of Mula is used as a reference point to this. So basically the concept is that the Earth is always moving, the Sun in the solar system is always moving, but the point within our concept of the universe that is most easily relatable, that is as still as possible, is the center of our galaxy. So therefore it only makes sense to base an Ayanamsa upon that, okay, because it will stay static for the longest period of time, while here within our perspective of consciousness, things are always up and down and changing and in a state of dualism because of the movement of the Sun and the Earth. So I really like this concept, because what it does is it brings more of the universal concepts of astrology from the lunar mansions, which will be a point for one of our future classes, may even be the next one, into the fixed system of consciousness, which helps to give us a deeper understanding of the whys and the what-fors and why we're having the experiences within consciousness that we are indeed having. That's going to do it for our first Vedic astrology class. I think that next class we'll move on to talking about the nakshatras, or the lunar mansions, which are another one of the major differences between Western astrology, which is what most people are familiar with when they're reading their sun sign horoscopes, and Vedic astrology, which has a lot of different techniques by which you can gain information, which if you stick with these classes, you'll learn many of those techniques, and pretty soon you'll be able to look at your own chart and gain an understanding, because Vedic astrology does give you the capacity to do that. So I thank you very much for watching this first class, and I hope to soon be able to share further classes with you. Thank you.